Bashira had never been this far from her home star. The light outside the shuttle window was a soft golden hue, not the sharp violet of Calathi Prime. Everything about the human sector felt slower, warmer, and strangely alive. Even the air in the docking bay of Sol Frontier Station carried a smell she didn't know. Metal, oil, and something sweet like the inside of a fruit. She stood tall, her crystalline blue skin catching the light as she waited for her new owner. The trader who brought her here had said her contract was bought by a human named Elias Wren. Humans, she had learned, were the newest species allowed to trade beyond their solar system. They were unpredictable, too emotional, but oddly clever. The Calathi High Circle had warned their people never to trust humans completely. Bashira didn't care. She just wanted to serve her term quietly, repay her debt, and one day go home again. A tall man approached through the crowd. His clothes were simple, a brown jacket over a light shirt, worn boots, and a small silver badge that marked him as captain of a registered ship. His hair was dark and a little messy, and there was an easy smile on his face that made him look younger than he probably was. Bashira, he said, pronouncing her name carefully. I'm Elias Wren. Welcome aboard. She bowed slightly, as was polite. I am ready to perform my assigned duties, Captain. He frowned a little. Assigned duties? You mean your job? Yes, as your servant. The frown deepened, but he didn't argue. Right. Well, let's get you settled first. You can call me Elias. He turned and led her down the docking corridor. Bashira followed, her long coat trailing softly against the floor. Humans were shorter and softer than Calathi, but she noticed how confident his movements were, how he kept glancing back to make sure she was following. No other employer had ever done that. When they reached his ship, the Halcyon Dream, she paused in surprise. It was small, barely large enough for a crew of 3, but clean and carefully maintained. The name was painted on the hull in looping human letters, the paint faded but proud. Inside, the ship was filled with soft light and strange decorations. A photograph of a green landscape hung on the wall. A few potted plants grew near the control deck. The air smelled faintly of coffee. This will be your room, Elias said, opening a narrow door. It's not much, but it's yours. Bashira stepped inside. The room was small but private, with a real bed, a desk, and a window that showed the stars. She turned to him, puzzled. This is my quarters? Yeah, Elias said. Everyone deserves their own space. But servants do not. You're not a servant, he said quickly. You're my engineer's assistant. That's what you signed for, right? She blinked, the light in her crystalline eyes dimming slightly. No, I was sold as domestic help. For a moment, silence filled the corridor. Elias stared at her, confusion spreading across his face. Sold? Wait, hold on, you think I bought you? Yes, she said simply. That is the arrangement. He rubbed a hand over his face and let out a slow breath. Oh, stars. That's a misunderstanding. I don't own people. Humans don't do that. You were hired, Bashira. You'll get paid. Bashira stood still, unsure what to say. Paid, hired? Such terms didn't exist in the Calathi servitude system. Either one belonged to a house or one did not. Freedom was something you earned after service, not something given first. Elias smiled gently. How about we talk after dinner? You've had a long trip. He left her to rest, but Bashira did not rest. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the stars through the window. Humans were strange. Kindness from a master was one thing, but equality, that felt almost insulting. Yet she couldn't deny the warmth in his voice, the absence of command. It unsettled her in ways she couldn't name. Later that evening, she found him in the galley preparing food. The smell was strange but pleasant, something cooked and spicy. I have finished organizing the cargo bay, she reported. He looked up, surprised. You didn't have to do that. You just got here. I am here to work, she said firmly. Well, thank you, he replied, smiling again. But you should take a break. Sit, try this. He handed her a bowl. She looked at it suspiciously but accepted. The flavor was unlike anything she knew, warm, bright, and full of life. It's curry, Elias said. Old Earth recipe. Earth, she repeated softly. You humans talk much about your home world. Yeah, it's not perfect, but it's ours. We've messed it up a few times, but we keep trying to make it better. Bashira studied him. Your kind must value persistence. Maybe. We value choice, he said, his tone turning thoughtful. That's what freedom means to us. The right to decide what you do with your life. Freedom. The word felt heavy in her mind, like a bright stone dropped into deep water. She wanted to understand it, but centuries of Kalathi tradition pressed against her thoughts. The days that followed passed in quiet rhythm. Vashira repaired conduits, cataloged supplies, and adjusted the ship's scanners. Elias often worked beside her, asking her opinion on navigation or engine output. At first she answered stiffly, unsure why he wanted her input. But slowly his easy humor began to melt her reserve. He laughed often, sometimes at small things, sometimes for no reason at all. Once, when a coolant pipe burst and covered him in bright blue mist, he laughed so hard he could barely breathe. "See," he said between gasps. "Instant spa treatment." Vashira couldn't help it. She laughed too. The sound startled her. Kalathi laughter was rare and private, but the human sound was infectious. Over time, she noticed more about him. He fixed broken panels not because it was his duty, but because he wanted to keep his ship alive. He spoke to the plants in the galley as if they were crew members. He listened to old music from Earth, full of emotion and rhythm that touched something deep inside her. One evening, as they drifted through the quiet of deep space, Vashira found herself watching him at the controls. He looked tired but peaceful, his hand resting lightly on the throttle. "Why did you buy me if not as a servant?" she asked suddenly. He looked at her with surprise. "I didn't buy you. I paid a broker to cover your travel papers and clearance fees. You were stranded after your last employer dissolved, right? I just gave you a ride and a job offer," she frowned. "But the contract said—" "The broker lied," Elias said simply. "Happens all the time to people coming from systems like yours. I'm sorry." His voice carried no anger, only sadness. "And that made it even more confusing. You should not apologize. I should have known." "Not your fault either," he said with a smile. "You're free to leave any time. But if you stay, I'd like your help running this ship. You're brilliant with systems." The word free echoed in her again. It made her chest feel too tight. That night, she stood at the viewport for hours, watching the slow swirl of stars. For the first time in her life, there were no commands waiting, no schedule, no obligations written by someone else. She didn't know whether to feel afraid or grateful. Weeks passed. Together they traveled between colonies, delivering supplies and mapping asteroid routes. Vashira learned to understand human jokes, even make a few of her own. Elias taught her how to fly the ship, how to play old Earth songs on a small digital instrument he called a guitar. Sometimes, she caught herself smiling when she didn't mean to. One quiet morning, as they approached a nebula that shimmered like liquid silver, Elias said softly, "You know, you never have to call me Captain. Just Elias." She hesitated. "Among my people, to speak a name without title is considered intimate," he grinned. "Then maybe it's time you learned how humans do things." Vashira turned away, but the light in her crystalline skin flickered softly, a Kalathi sign of embarrassment. Then one day, the ship's navigation system malfunctioned near an uncharted region. The energy fields there disrupted the engines, forcing them to make repairs in open space. Elias worked under the hull, and Vashira stayed inside monitoring his life support link. When the system glitched, she felt panic rise in her chest, a sharp, unfamiliar fear that something could happen to him. When his voice finally came through the calm and joking as always, she found her hands trembling. Humans, she thought, are fragile, and yet somehow they make others strong. That night, when Elias returned to the cabin, he noticed her silence. "You okay? I was worried," she said quietly. He smiled, wiping grease from his hands. "That's kind of you. But you don't have to worry, Vashira. I've been fixing ships since I was 12. "I am not kind," she replied. "I simply did not wish to lose my post." "Sure," he said lightly. "Whatever you say." But she knew he didn't believe her, and maybe she thought neither did she. As they resumed their journey, something had changed. The space between them felt alive with unspoken things. She began to see him not as her superior, but as her equal, though she would never admit it aloud. One evening, when they passed through the glowing rings of a young planet, Elias brought out 2 cups of hot earth tea and handed her one. "To new worlds," he said. Vashira lifted the cup awkwardly. "To freedom?" she offered, testing the word. He grinned. "Exactly." The warmth of the drink spread through her, strange and comforting. She looked at him and felt, for the first time, that maybe freedom wasn't something given or taken. It was something chosen. Later, when she returned to her room, she looked at her reflection in the mirror. Her crystalline skin shimmered faintly with gold light, a Kalathi sign of inner peace. She touched the glass and whispered, "Freedom." The word felt strange but beautiful. The weeks had grown into months. Vishira had settled into a rhythm aboard the Halcyon Dream. But life in the stars was never simple. Each day brought a new challenge. Uncharted space, strange energy storms, and planets with conditions that tested every skill she and Elias had learned. Still, every obstacle gave them a reason to rely on one another. And slowly, Vishira began to see Elias not just as a human, but as a companion whose heart was as steady as the ship's engines. It was a quiet morning when the Kalathi envoy arrived. Their ship, sleek and sharp-edged, cut through the stars like a dagger. Vishira had always known this day would come. The message had been clear. She was expected to return to her homeworld, and any refusal would bring dishonor. Elias was in the control room when the transmission appeared. Vishira stood beside him, feeling the tension twist inside her. "Vishira," Elias said softly, "this is serious. They'll not accept excuses." "I know," she replied, her voice steady despite the storm of thoughts inside her. "My people, they do not understand humans." "I understand humans," he said with a small smile. "I also understand you. Whatever you choose, I will respect it. But I hope you stay. Not because I want you here, but because I want us to be together." Her crystalline eyes met his. For a moment, words were impossible. She had never encountered a human like Elias, one who could offer freedom and still make a space for someone else's choice. The Kalathi envoy's voice came through the comm, cold and precise. "Vishira, you must return immediately. You are considered in default of your social obligations. Failure to comply will result in exile." Vishira bowed her head. "I understand," she said quietly. The envoy's words felt like heavy chains pressing against her heart, yet her mind refused to surrender. She looked at Elias. "I cannot leave yet, not while I still have duties here that I choose to perform." The silence was brief but powerful. The envoy's eyes, even through the screen, seemed to narrow in disbelief. "You defy the Kalathi Circle?" "Yes," Vishira said firmly. "I choose my own path." Elias reached out and touched her hand. She flinched for a moment, then allowed it. The warmth of his skin was comforting, grounding her in a reality that was hers to shape. The envoy's ship pulled away, but the tension remained. That night, Vishira sat in her room staring at the stars. She thought of home, of her ancestors' expectations, of the life she had once imagined for herself. And yet there was a new feeling inside her, a sense of possibility, of partnership, of life that could be chosen, not dictated. Elias knocked gently at her door and stepped in. "You've been quiet," he said. "I wanted to see you before we sleep." Vishira did not answer immediately. She studied him, the human who had changed her perception of freedom and trust. "Why are you so patient with me?" she asked. "Because you deserve it," he replied simply. "Humans make mistakes. We are not perfect, but we try. And I try to make people feel safe, especially those I care about." The words touched something deep within her. Care. Such a simple concept, yet it carried more weight than any law, any contract, any social expectation she had known. Days passed. Vishira and Elias continued their journey, visiting distant colonies and mapping star systems. In every port, Vishira noticed the subtle shifts in perception. Other species whispered about the Kalathi woman traveling with a human, about the unconventional partnership that defied tradition. She felt pride mixed with a hint of fear. Pride because she had chosen her own path, fear because breaking tradition was never without risk. One afternoon, as they passed near a sparkling blue planet, Elias stopped the ship and turned to her. "Vishira, I want to show you something." She followed him to the observation deck. Outside, the planet shimmered like liquid crystal, its oceans reflecting the sunlight in 100 hues. He held out a small silver band, simple but elegant. "This is a human custom," he said. "It means I choose you, not as a servant, not as someone who owes me anything, as someone I want to share my life with. Will you be my wife?" Vishira's heart skipped a beat. She had studied human customs, had heard stories of marriage, but never expected to experience one herself. In her world, such acts were ceremonial, calculated, and often strategic. But this was different. Elias's eyes held no obligation, no expectation, only sincerity. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for the band. I do not fully understand your species' ways, she admitted, but I wish to understand them with you. A smile spread across his face, gentle and triumphant. Then we will learn together. The moment felt suspended in time. Stars danced outside the viewport. The ship's hum a soft lullaby, and Vashira felt a warmth she had never known. For the first time in her life, she was not bound by duty or fear. She was bound by choice, and the bond was stronger than any contract. The following days were filled with quiet celebration. The crew of a nearby colony station greeted them with curiosity and respect. Elias and Vashira walked through bustling markets and sparkling plazas. Their presence a subtle statement. Humans and Calathi could choose partnership, even love, across the boundaries of species and expectation. Vashira learned more about human customs each day. She discovered laughter that was free and untethered, music that stirred the soul, and food that carried stories of home and history. Elias, in turn, learned about the Calathi ways, their art, their songs, their attention to detail, and the quiet dignity that marked every action. Together, they built a new rhythm aboard the ship, one that respected both their origins and their choices. One evening, while the ship drifted through a nebula of pink and violet gases, Elias brought out a small painting he had purchased from a market on a distant colony. It depicted a human family on a green world standing together beneath a bright sun. For us, he said softly. Vashira examined the painting. Her fingers traced the brushstrokes. We are not like this, she said, yet we may become something new. Exactly, Elias replied. We will make our own story. As they continued through the stars, Vashira realized the truth of human philosophy. Freedom was not just the absence of chains. It was the ability to choose, to create, to connect, and to trust. She had thought she was a servant, bound to a life dictated by others. Now she was a partner, a co-creator of her own destiny. Months turned into years. The Halcyon dream became more than a ship. It became a symbol. Other species began to see humans in a new light, as a people who valued choice and courage, who could partner across boundaries and bring hope to the galaxy. Vashira and Elias's story spread quietly from station to station, inspiring young Calathi and Terrans alike. They traveled together, mapping distant systems, documenting rare planets, and learning from every culture they encountered. And every night beneath the glow of distant stars they would share stories, meals, and laughter. Their bond grew, not out of obligation or law, but out of choice, respect, and care. Vashira often reflected on the day she first believed she had been bought as a maid. The thought now seemed almost distant, a shadow of a life she had left behind. She no longer feared duty imposed by others. Instead, she embraced the responsibilities she chose to carry with Elias. One quiet night, as they floated above a planet with oceans the color of emerald, Vashira stood at the viewport holding Elias's hand. She turned to him and said, her voice soft but certain, I am yours, not by law, not by obligation, but by my choice. And I wish to walk with you in all the stars we have yet to see. Elias smiled, his eyes reflecting the swirl of galaxies outside. And I with you, he said. Everywhere together. In that moment, the universe felt smaller yet infinite. Two beings from different worlds had found a way to meet in the middle. Not as master and servant, not as employer and employee, but as equals, companions, and partners. The galaxy, vast and unyielding, had no claim over them. Only choice, love, and shared adventure mattered now. The Halcyon dream sailed onward through the stars, carrying its two travelers into uncharted territories. Vashira had discovered freedom. Elias had discovered partnership. And together, they had discovered something even greater, the power of trust, choice in the human heart, and so, their story continued, not dictated by contracts or custom, but written across the stars, an unbroken journey of wonder, courage, and love.